Welcome to today's critique, where we are looking at a highly provocative, fast-paced YouTube script commenting on recent military actions in the Middle East and the ensuing political fallout. Refining the heavy reliance on repetitive internet slang will sharpen the script's underlying geopolitical arguments and prevent audience fatigue.
You have this incredibly defiant, victorious tone right out of the gate as you talk about Operation Epic Fury. And you're clearly aiming for a visceral, aggressive takedown of the detractors.
But the weakness here is that you are relying so heavily on inflammatory internet jargon that it is entirely drowning out your actual analytical points.
Right. I mean, you're calling Twitch streamers, foreign leaders, and domestic politicians retards or cucks in almost every single paragraph.
And when you hurl the exact same explicit insult at completely different targets over and over again, the sheer volume creates this abrasive noise floor.
The words just lose their punch.
Exactly. Instead of sounding like a sharp, incisive commentator, the script starts to sound like a prolonged temper tantrum, which really distracts from your very real arguments about international hypocrisy and military strategy.
Is there a risk, though, that if we strip out too much of that raw, internet-native slang, we might alienate the core demographic, the people who click on your videos exactly for that visceral, unpolished reaction?
I hear that, and we definitely don't want to sanitize your voice or turn this into a dry academic lecture. The goal isn't to make the script polite.
Right, we don't want polite
language for punctuated, high-impact moments rather than using it as constant filler, and to replace the repetitive insults with sharper, more varied satirical jabs that actually deconstruct your opponent's specific arguments.
So we are talking about upgrading your rhetorical arsenal, not disarming you.
That's a perfect way to put it. If every single punch you throw is the exact same internet buzzword, it stops hurting. It just becomes background. Think about the mechanics of great political satire or commentary. The most devastating insults are the ones that are hyper-specific to the target's hypocrisy.
Let's look at how you handled the United Kingdom's prime minister in the script. You point out this incredible contradiction. He admits there were over 20 potentially lethal attacks on UK soil, backed by this foreign regime.
Yep, 20 attacks.
Yet he refused to let the U.S. use British air bases for the retaliatory strike and then just issued a generic statement of concern afterward.
Which is a massive logical contradiction.
It is. But right now, you just cap off that observation by calling him the exact same explicit insult you used on a random Twitch streamer 2 pages earlier.
Right. And by doing that, you're letting him off the hook. You're defaulting to a generic buzzword when you actually have the ammunition for a lethal, tailored strike.
So instead of the repetitive name-calling, mock the absolute absurdity of him writing a strongly worded letter after completely denying base access.
Frame his response as performative bureaucratic theater. Paint a picture of a guy bravely defending his country with a fountain pen and a politely cleared throat while the actual dismantling of the terror network is happening without him.
I like that. By highlighting the specific, logical absurdity of his actions, you deliver a much more devastating blow. You make him look ridiculous rather than just calling him a name.
Building on that, let's look at the online commentators you're targeting. You spend a good amount of time tearing into political streamers who are complaining about the timing of the strikes and hyperfixating on international law.
And again, the default here is to just barrage them with standard internet slang.
But think about the contrast between their complaints and the reality on the ground. You just detailed massive regional retaliation strikes launched by the dismantled regime against 7 neighboring countries.
So use precise, exaggerated metaphors to expose their geopolitical naivety.
Exactly. If a streamer is ignoring a 7-country barrage to complain about the legality of a preemptive allied strike, paint them as an armchair general throwing a literal tantrum over toy soldiers while real global chess pieces are being moved.
Describe them sitting in their LED-lit bedrooms, furiously reading Wikipedia articles on the Geneva Convention, completely disconnected from the kinetic reality of the conflict.
This kind of varied rhetorical toolkit makes your edge feel so much sharper. When you finally do drop a massive, provocative piece of profanity, the audience will actually feel the impact because they haven't been numb to it for the last 10.
It really comes down to contrast. If the whole script is at a level 10 of aggression, there are no dynamics. You want those valleys of sharp, intelligent mockery so that the peaks of absolute, unfiltered outrage actually mean something.
Grouping the script's content into distinct thematic chapters will transform the currently chaotic narrative into a compelling, escalating story.
The erratic language we just talked about actually bleeds right into the second major issue, which is the erratic pacing.
The current weakness in the flow is that your narrative is highly haphazard, ping-ponging constantly between military updates, random social media reactions, historical context from 2011, and the president's speech.
Because of this, it is incredibly difficult for the viewer to follow the timeline of the actual military operation you are trying to break down.
It really does cause severe whiplash. In the span of about 2 pages, we are thrown from a tense discussion about stealth bombers straight into a tweet from a domestic politician complaining about the budget.
And then backward to the lore of proxy rebel groups.
Forward to an Israeli media shitpost featuring an El Presidente chart, and then suddenly back into a highly technical deep dive on how bunker buster bombs work.
It reads like the architecture of a doom scroll.
Yes, when you're scrolling on Twitter, that context switching works because every post is isolated. But in a video essay or a commentary script, if you force the audience to switch context every 15 seconds, their cognitive load maxes out and they click off.
You are completely undermining the tension of the massive military event you're covering because every time you build momentum, you interrupt yourself to complain about a meme.
Is it possible that the current structure is trying to mirror the real-time chaos of how this event unfolded online?
I can see the appeal of trying to capture that manic energy.
But the suggestion here is to reorganize the script into a clear 3-act structure. First, establishing the factual timeline of the military operation. Then, analyzing the geopolitical ramifications. And finally, dedicating a specific segment to the online fallout and reactions.
You have to be the curator of the chaos, not just a victim of it. Think about the viewer's journey. You could open purely with the narrative of Operation Epic Fury.
Build a dedicated first act where you sequence all the kinetic, action-oriented details. You have amazing tactical elements in here.
The pinpoint strikes on the leader's compound.
The targeted destruction of the air defenses.
The hacking of the regional prayer notification apps to send a warning to civilians saying, help is on the way.
And the zero casualty reports for the Allied forces. Those details are gripping. When you group them together, it reads like a thriller.
Exactly. By keeping all these military and tactical elements glued together, you build an uninterrupted recounting of the action that hooks the viewer from the very first minute.
You establish the reality of the situation on the ground before you introduce any opinion.
Once that factual foundation is laid down, you can smoothly shift gears into your second act, which is the strategic analysis and the long-term planning.
This is where you consolidate all that historical context that is currently scattered everywhere. Bring in the quotes from 2011 regarding the nuclear program.
Analyze the president's strategy of maintaining aerial supremacy to avoid boots on the ground.
Discuss the broader regional implications of striking a regime that historically chokes international shipping lanes.
You're stepping back from the tactical zoom in and zooming out to the strategic map.
And then, and this is the most crucial part for your specific style, you quarantine all the crash shouts.
Quarantine the drama. I love that.
Take every single reaction from the political streamers, the domestic politicians, and the foreign leaders, and put them into a dedicated meltdown segment at the very end of the video.
It totally changes the psychological dynamic of the video. Instead of constantly interrupting your serious military breakdown to mock a Twitch streamer, you save all of those reactions for a highly anticipated, satisfying climax.
It acts as the payoff. The audience gets their vegetables first. They get the facts, they understand the military strategy, they see the geopolitical context.
And then, as their dessert, they get to sit back and enjoy your promised satirical takedown of all the detractors who got it wrong.
It gives the video a true sense of momentum and escalation. You aren't just reacting randomly to things as they pop into your head. You are guiding the viewer through a masterclass, and then you're inviting them to laugh at the people who didn't understand the lesson.
It also makes your mockery hit so much harder because by the time you get to Act 3 and start ripping into the internet commentators, the audience is fully educated on the reality of the strikes.
They can see exactly why the commentators are wrong because you just spent 10 minutes proving it to them.
Expanding upon the briefly mentioned geopolitical ripple effects will significantly deepen the script's perceived authority and overall value to the audience.
This ties directly into that second act we were just talking about. You make make a remarkably strong case for the strategic brilliance of this operation by dropping massive, fascinating global implications right in the middle of your tech.
But the weakness here is that you touch upon these massive implications, like cutting off an adversary's oil supply or stopping the flow of manufactured drones to Eastern Europe, and then you immediately abandon them to go back to reading angry social media posts.
It's almost frustrating as a reader because you drop these incredibly insightful geopolitical observations about how this single localized strike impacts the entire global superpower ecosystem, and then you casually toss them aside.
You undercut your own intelligence by rushing back to complain about what an internet personality said on a live stream.
You have this massive geopolitical checkmate sitting right there on the board, and you don't even pause to point it out to the audience.
You're prioritizing petty internet beef over global supply chain logistics, and it's holding you back from being seen as a true authority.
The suggestion is to pause the rapid-fire reaction commentary to genuinely unpack these geopolitical checkmates, demonstrating a high-level understanding of the global chessboard, which will make the subsequent mockery of detractors feel much more earned and authoritative.
Think about the ethos you are trying to establish. If you are just another angry guy on the internet yelling at streamers, you are on the exact same level as the streamers you are mocking. It's just noise.
But if you establish yourself as a high-level geopolitical analyst who understands the invisible threads connecting global conflicts, and then you mock the streamers, you win.
It's a classic comedic trope, the contrast between highbrow, big-picture intelligence and lowbrow, petty insult. But for that contrast to work, you have to actually flesh out the highbrow stuff.
Let's look at the mention of the targeted regime being an oil factory that keeps other global superpowers operational, particularly concerning the global AI race.
That is a brilliant connection.
But you only give it one sentence. Take a full minute to explain exactly how this military strike cripples that specific supply chain.
Trace the line for your audience. From the dismantled regime's oil fields to the tankers, directly into the economic engines powering a rival nation's artificial intelligence data centers.
Break down the math of. Show the viewer how a kinetic strike in the Middle East throttles server farms halfway across the world.
By visualizing that domino effect, you completely transform your role in the video. You aren't just an energetic commentator anymore. You're the smartest guy in the room, explaining the mechanics of the world to your audience.
And you do it again with the drone manufacturing infrastructure. You briefly mentioned the Shahed drones being utilized in a massive conflict in Eastern Europe.
You even use the phrase sexy imperialism to describe how taking out these factories achieves multiple global security objectives without deploying a single soldier to those secondary conflict zones.
It's a fantastic, provocative phrase. But what does it actually mean in the context of the Eastern European drone bottle? You have to map that out for us.
Exactly. Elaborate on the direct connection between the dismantled regime and the sudden halt in foreign drone capabilities.
Explain how dismantling the air defenses and the manufacturing hubs in one region effectively grinds a completely separate, heavily funded war machinery to a halt.
When you explain the concept of taking out two birds with one stone on a global macroeconomic scale, your audience is going to be glued to the screen.
Taking just a few moments to unpack these strategic points rather than rushing past them to get back to internet drama is an incredibly effective way to build your credibility.
The core goal here is the juxtaposition. You want to create a massive canyon between your real-world geopolitical awareness and the petty online complaints of the commentators you are critiquing.
When you build yourself up as an expert who understands global AI supply chains and transnational drone logistics, your teardowns of people complaining on Twitter land with 10 times the weight.
It really makes the whole script cohesive. The sharper vocabulary makes you sound smarter.
The 3-act structure gives you the space to actually explain the operation.
And expanding on the geopolitics proves that you actually know what you're talking about. It takes all that raw, chaotic energy you brought to the draft and focuses it into a laser.
To recap, your script has a ton of raw energy and a distinct aggressive voice,
but its impact can be significantly strengthened by refining how you deploy that energy.
By varying your vocabulary to reduce the repetitive, abrasive insults, you allow your actual arguments to be heard.
By reorganizing the chaotic flow into clear thematic chapters, like dedicating an act purely to the operation and saving the meltdown for the end, you create a compelling narrative that hooks the viewer.
And finally, by taking the time to fully unpack those massive geopolitical implications regarding global oil and drone supply chains, you establish a powerful authority that makes your eventual mockery of the detractors completely devastating.
The final video will hit much harder and resonate much more deeply if you lean into the actual intelligence of your analysis. Thank you for sharing this piece with us. We highly encourage you to implement these actionable suggestions and submit your revised work back in for another critique.